Hi, this is Damien Marie AtHope, and I am an axiological atheist, which can simply be understood as a value theory or a value science atheist. And I'm going to give you my little presentation on Pre-Animism. And this is just the rough ideas of the general, behaviors that seems to be expressed. Around 500,000 to 233,000 years ago seems to be one of the oldest anthropomorphic art, which I considered part of Pre-Animism, and is related to what looks like female. 400,000 years ago, we have the social cultural evolution in its oldest sense, which is to me the Pre-Animism portable art, that is at least 300,000 years old. And we have Homo naledi and intentional, seems like ceremonial or cemetery behaviors, which I also consider to be kind of a Pre-Animism. And that's dated to, possibly 250,000, years ago. And let's go back to the beginning, though. To me, possibly around 1,000,000 years ago, I surmise that Pre-Animism, in a sense, was an animistic superstitionism. It began and possibly led to more of an animistic somethingism or animistic supernaturalism, which I think had probably emerged around 300,000 years ago. And about 100,000 years ago, I think it evolves into a representation of what's more of a general anism, which is present, I believe, in the smaller part, in almost all the world religions that we have today. So to me, anism is not like a religion has a set of doctrines. It's more to me like a persuasion. I see kind of totemism the same way, even possibly shamanism to some extent, to where it's more loose. So I don't think there ever was like a complete unified, animism, and it was some kind of a thing that spread or anything, and certainly even less so to Pre-Animism. Pre-Animism, I think, is just this general persuasion, and I think that possibly these stones, some of them with faces, has to do with possibly veneration of ancestors or the dead. And so in Anthropology kind of states that Pre-Animism is a stage of religious development supposed to precede animism, in which material objects were believed to contain possibly a spiritual energy. I think possibly that related to, ancestors or some sort of a thing like that. And to me, this kind of a primal pre-religion, sort of, this pre-animism or proto-animism, I guess you could call it. Or at least, there's a transmission, it seems, to some belief in the respect for burial or maybe thoughts of an afterlife. Or maybe that was the motivation that required, these stones. Maybe not. But I think that they are, and they may also have been transferred, from Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergus, through tool use and associated possibly, ideas or thinking related to these other anthropomorphic things, or burial or afterlife, or some of these loose thinking to Neanderthals, and in the sense arcane, to humans. And this happened, I think, possibly when we bred with them. And Neanderthals, also though inbred with Homo erectus, the upright walking man, Homo habilis, the tool-using man, and possibly others, including the Denisovans, which means that they could have possibly learned some of these Pre-Animism ideas from one of the other hominids, and this was possibly expressed in, like I said, the anthropomorphic portable art, which could have some relation to ancestor veneration as well. So back to around 500,000 to 400,000 years ago, the earliest European hominid crania associated with the kind of Aluvian hand axes are at sites at several different places. And one of the possible sites belongs to a Neanderthal, and the other one is another type of a hominid, which has been attributed to Homo heidelbergus, or a subspecies of possibly Homo erectus. In a sense, this is an incipient stage of the Neanderthal evolution, more likely. Anyways, the dating somewhere in Portugal, there's one dating from 436,000 to 390,000 years ago, and provides important evidence on some of the earliest European alluvian tool, using hominids, as well as could show transfer of ideas between them. Homo erectus, the upright walking man, lived between 1.89 million to 143,000 years ago, whereas early African Homo erectus, had sometimes called Homo erasure, are the oldest known early humans to have possessed modern human-like attributes. The earliest evidence of campfires occurred during a time of Homo erectus. While there is evidence that campfires were used for cooking and possibly sharing food, they are likely to have been also places of social interaction, the use of warmth to keep away from large predators, and possibly even relating to what I think is the primal religion ideas that emerge in Pre-Animism, which may have included this fire secularization, possibly even fire worship to some extent. Neanderthals used fire 400,000 years ago, and there is evidence of a 300,000-year-old campfire from Israel, which is not surprising since our human ancestors have controlled fire for seemingly 1.5 million to 300,000 years ago at least, and beyond. The benefits of fire are not only to cook food or to fend off predators, but they also extend the day and add to community by how the fire in the middle of the darkness is mellowing in its effect, and also can offer somewhat ethereal and excite people to awe, and possibly inspire even pre-animistic superstitionism. Fire was also used to heat up and to make stone tools crack easier, or to add in them being sharper and stronger. So the forehead box P2 or Fox P2 is implicated in human speech and language, playing an important role in the plasticity of developing brain, and that of modern populations suggests it has been a target of positive Darwin evolution-like selection during recent human evolution. The first mutation of exon 7 more around 400,000 years ago, prior to the perceived Neanderthal and human split, and impact on FOXP2 function. The second event, beginning within the last 200,000 years, did not involve further amino acid changes because Neanderthal and human FOXP2 are identical. But this might have affected instead the FOXP2. Overall, there was strong evidence in the study that a section of FOXP2 seems to target in Europeans, but not in Han Chinese, Japanese, or Yoruba populations. Analysis of ancient DNA supplies have revealed that the amino acid differences we share with Neanderthals, who split from modern humans around 300,000 to 400,000 years ago, and the holotypes extend across the amino acid changes. And Neanderthals and humans share 2 changes in the FOXP2 compared with chimpanzees. Possibilities range from interaction gene flow to that of a common ancestor to both, or changes and selective sweep occurrence before the divergence that could mean Neanderthals had language or other type of capabilities. This would, to me, aid in the transmission or distribution of religious or sacred type of ideas. There was a primitive Homo sapiens skull found in Morocco dated to 300,000 years ago, with remarkable similarities to the Moroccan skull. There was one found in China dated to around 260,000 years ago. Sun-worshipping baboons rise early to catch the African sunrise and race each other to the top for the best spots. Thus, we may rightly ponder how much did fireside tales or the sun aid in the socio-cultural religious transformations or transfers, thus evolution of these ideas. In the dark, under flickering lights, and the stars above, and the fire below, is a scene one would think of wonder, could be fear and mystery. Was superstition expanded and religion then further led down this path and imagined? It would seem that superstition was expanded to some extent, and religion possibly pushed further to this end. Maybe imagined because of you're looking ahead, the heavenly lights above and the flickering light of fire below. One could see easy the idea to secularize. This does not mean to be somewhat supported, but it is of interest and could be, if you think about it, there's a researcher who spent 40 years studying African Bushmen who gathered evidence of the importance of gathering around nighttime campfires. And since they are, in a sense, or some of them are in almost hunter-gatherers or close to the existence living as the ancestors that we had before. And they transfer social information, shared emotions with these fireside tales. This may provide a correlation that our possible prehistoric ancestors also, and those ancestors before them, likely lived in a similar way to the Bushmen do currently, and thus possibly also used the fire in a similar way. Although we cannot directly peer into the past to know fully the past from the indigenous Bushmen, these people do live in a way that our ancestors have lived for around 99% of our time in evolution. Fire as a sacred or magic thing can be seen in consuming fires, seen as volcanoes, lightning, that are gods or God's power and vengeance even today. Holy fires, as a meaning of transformation or magical purification of things. A magical being used in worship of the sun or punishment in hell-like fires, which could be seen as a mixing of possibly even fire and water. And you see some of that possibly in Buddhism mythology of the different frozen hells. Even if these things are only symbolic and I don't believe them, I can see where it is easy to fall into superstition, especially without education or an understanding of what's really happening. Ceremonies such as bonfires, eternal flames, or sacred candles, incense, lights, lamps, are in one form or another incorporating in many faiths this fire worship, even in faiths like Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, Baalism, Shintoism, Taoism, etc., etc., etc. All this worship of the fire, sun, stars, is hardly special to humans, since many other primates seem to worship storms, other forms of fire, sunrises. We have, it seems, forgotten this primitive nature worship, though it's still in every religion today. Animistic superstitionism, animistic somethingism, animistic supernaturalism is present in today's religions. The mega religions of now think they are so removed from this animistic superstitionism, yet they show they are not. Their rituals, beliefs, prayers have a deep connection to these animistic nature worship, but are even sometimes more hidden in such things that they think are removed, such as their burning candles, which is simply a kind of worshiping of fire. Archaeology reveals that the world's oldest sculpture has enhanced by hominoid hands. To date, the oldest human three-dimensional representation is the Tantan sculpture, an anthropomorphic human-formed rock or pebble from Morocco, and it was found in an ancient river deposits. It was alluvian, and it was dated between 500 to 300,000 years old. And of course, the 500,000 to 233,000 years old figure from Israel, another sculpture, which is called the goddess of Bakram, from the Bakram sites in the Golan Heights. It's a small quartzite pebble. It resembles a human female figure with believed magical qualities, possibly, or representing something that's believed to be possibly magical or spirit-filled or something. I think it's almost like a representation to me, possibly, of something else. But anyways, is this just art or is it a form of ancestor veneration? To me, pre-Animism ideas can be seen in rock art, such as the expressly portable anthropomorphic art, which may be revealed as some sort of an ancestor veneration. This seemingly magical thinking may stem from a social or even non-religious function of ancestor veneration that then becomes more magical in a sense in its explanation. And with creativities of things like kinship values, which is easy to see. And then there's such things as, parental, loyalty, family loyalty, community, family lineage, sort of ideas. So, and to me, ancestor veneration occurs in societies, with seemingly every degree of social, political, and technological complexities. And it remains an important component of various religious practices, even in modern times. Humans are not special. We are not the only species which bury even their dead. And this includes the practice that has been observed in chimpanzees, elephants in a sense, and possibly even dogs, doing a type of intentional burial practice since even sometimes possibly with what could be almost perceived as grave goods, and seemingly with the concern for the dead. And this is also true of Neanderthals that are like us. And, we're in a sense the first human species to practice these burial. And certainly evidence of them doing intentional burying of the dead. That's undisputed before us. And since most of them were done in shallow graves, some with stone tools or animal bones. And there's some sites in Iraq, in Israel, and Corsica. Earliest undisputed human burials date back to about 100,000 years ago, remain stained with red ochre, and show ritual intentional similarities to the Neanderthals before them. 300,000 years ago is the first possible appearance of humans in Morocco. 270,000 years ago, the age of the Y-DNA hologroup AOO. In a sense, they call it Y chromosomal atom. 250,000 years ago is the appearance of Homo Neanderthal, for sure. Anyways, and then you have 250 to 200,000 is modern human presence in West Asia, and 230 to 150 you have the age of mtDNA, hologroup L, which is considered to be mitochondrial Eve. 195,000 years ago, you have remains in Ethiopia of anatomically modern humans. 160,000 years ago, Homo sapiens are evident. 170,000 years ago, though, humans were already wearing clothing, it seems, by this date. 150,000 years ago, you have the peopling, in a sense, of Africa. And there's a age of mDNA, hologroup LO. 125,000 years ago, in a sense, is an integral period. And 120,000 to 90,000 in North Africa, the Sahara region is wet and fertile. 130,000 though is, in a sense, the earliest undisputed evidence for intentional burial, and it's from Neanderthals. Evidence suggests that the Neanderthals were the first humans to intentionally bury the dead, possibly doing cannibalism, which, though, could be evidence of some death ritual. Doing so, the burials in small graves usually. 130,000 years ago, the Neanderthals buried dead in sites like in Corsica. there was a total of, in Corsica, 876 single, in a sense, Neanderthal fossil remnants found. And the bones belong to several dozen different individuals of different sexes, ages from 2 to 40 years of age. Over 1,000 pieces of various stone tools and weapons were also found, in a sense, from this Paleolithic era, all witnessing to a material culture of the proto-humans. This rich locality is approximately, as I said, 130,000 years old, with numerous fossil remnants in the cave, such as cave bear, wolf, moose, large deer, and warm climate rhinoceros, wild cattle, and many other animals were also found. Moreover, there is bird skeletons, with some of these parts being modified intentionally, and are found in association with the Neanderthal bones, possibly as some sort of ritual. There are some talons and foot bones from the white-tailed eagle. They appear to have cut marks on the talons and foot bones, so they can be attached, suggesting possibly Neanderthals were using these talons bones as jewelry. This is supported by recent findings of gut fiber tied around part of a talon. There are a foot bone and a talon that have been modified, having cuts and grooves on them. Neanderthals were carnivores, though we know they also seem to use medical type plants, as well as may have eaten other vegetables. So Neanderthals teach us, in a sense, I think, primal religion, or pre-animism, or could have taught us, I should say, pre-animism, anism 120,000 years ago, or somehow transmitted it to us. Homo sapiens, it is known, have reached the Levant by 120,000 to 90,000 years ago. But that exit from Africa eventually went extinct. Homo sapiens, it is known, to have reached them by that time. The population diverged early from other modern humans in Africa, contributing genetically to the ancestors of the Neanderthals from the Altai Mountains of Siberia roughly 100,000 years ago. By contrast, we do detect such genetic contributions in the Sovians or the two European Neanderthals. In addition to later inbreeding events, the ancestors of Neanderthals from the Altai Mountains and early modern humans met and interbred, possibly even someplace near the Near East, many thousands of years earlier than previously thought. In 2005, a set of 7 teeth from Taberna Cave in Israel were studied and found to most likely be that of Neanderthal that had lived along about 90,000 years ago, and another Neanderthal was estimated to have been possibly dated at 150,000 years ago. A fossilized jawbone in a collapsed cave in Israel has said to date between 177,000 and 194,000 years old. The Taberna Cave contains a Neanderthal-type female dated to about 120,000 years ago. It's one of the most, in a sense, ancient human skeleton remains that can be found in Israel. And objects at the Taberna cave suggests that ancestral humans used fire at the site on a regular basis ever since about 350,000 years ago. The absolute chronology of the Levant, Israel, and local surrounding areas in the Middle Paleolithic from 300,000 to 45,000 fossils indicate that humans existed there between 120 and 90,000 years ago, possibly leaving the area due to climate change, making things colder, and again migrating and staying there in Israel again from 55,000 years ago until the present. The DNA genomic evidence suggests gene flow from early humans into eastern Altai mountain Neanderthals around 100,000 years ago, and the flow from Neanderthals to humans between around 60,000 and 50,000 years ago. In the Levant, the archaeological record cannot distinguish between the two Middle Paleolithic populations easily. The broad array of stone tool techniques and style variability is observed in the Levantan Middle Paleolithic is not clearly taxonomy related in all cases. The two populations seem to leave similar, sometimes, material cultural remains, in particular some lithic industries that may include some types of technology that are shared or similar. In addition, the populations seem to have had similar settlements and mobility patterns with respect to the use of the caves for habitation and seemingly even burials at Tabun Cave. These populations used the same cave. Therefore, it was also difficult to determine these species, settlements patterns, and behavior within this cave and possibly the Levant. The remains of 7 adults and 3 children were found at Skull Cave, and they are claimed to have been seeming burials. Assemblages of shells significantly different from the local area have also been recovered, suggesting that these people may have collected and employed shells as possible beads, as they are unlikely to have been used, in a sense, for food. The shoal layer B has been dated to around 81,000 to 101,000 years ago, with a certain method of resonance, they're able to come to a date of 100, possibly 119,000 years ago. So Shoal 5 had a mandible of a wild boar on its chest. The skull displayed prominent ridges and jawline that is considered to be distinctive of modern humans. When it was assumed, in a sense, to be, and it possibly even an advanced Neanderthal, but today generally assumed to just be modern human, but a very robust type. It is possible that Neanderthals and early modern humans did make contact in the region, and it is possible that the shoal and other cave hominids are partly, in a sense, of a Neanderthal hybrid or descent. Somewhat non-African population contains 1.4 Neanderthal genetic material, with hybridization possibly have taken place, believed, in the Middle East. It has been suggested, however, that the shoal hominids represent an extinct lineage. If this is the case, then modern humans could have, in a sense, even re-exited Africa around 70,000 years ago, crossing the Arabian Peninsula. Well, but modern humans were present in Arabia and southern Asia rather earlier than currently some believe, and probably had a presence somewhere about 130,000 to 70,000 years ago. This is the same route that has been taken by people who made modern tools, and this there's a Neanderthal girl's toe bone, and shows mating of 100,000 years ago. If the shoal barrels took place within a relatively short time span, then the best age estimate is 100,000 to possibly as far as 135, but 100 is more likely. However, we cannot conclude this, and they could be older, but it's a basic age range. And the presence of early modern humans and Neanderthals in Levant during, in a sense, a similar time is also interesting, and I think is a possibility that there could have been some transfer of ideas with the obvious transfer of DNA. As some of the first bands of modern humans moved out of Africa, they met and seemingly mated with Neanderthals. And this is also thought to have happened possibly even 100,000 years ago, maybe even in the Nile Valley, along with the coastal hills in the Middle East, or in one of the Arabian areas of the Arabian Peninsula. This early modern human lineage, though, is believed to have possibly died out, and they are not among the ancestors of what is believed to be living people today. But a small part of their DNA survived in the toe bone of the Neanderthal women who lived more than 50,000 years ago in the Desovian cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia, Russia. So let's look at some of the evolution. So to me, we can see the evolution in stone tool use. So their seemingly first use of stone tools is a 3.4 million year old bone with stone tool cuts from Ethiopia. Then alluvian tools were a new, more distinctive oval or pear-shaped hand axe demonstrating a higher mind, or seeming, which is associated with Homo erectus and the derived species such as the Homo heidelbergus across Africa and much of West Asia, South Asia, and Europe. As I said before, about 1.5 million years ago, 2 sites in Kenya show evidence of control of fire, with seemingly no evidence of cooking have been found. 1.3 million year old stone tool from South Africa. Primal superstition. 1 million years ago, there's controlled use of fire, includes cooking, improved stone tool manufacturing, and believes to be what could be proto-speech, all of which demonstrate thinking as well as cultural advances, which could have further aided in the development and distribution of primal superstitions, which lead down the path to later religion. This is the Venus of Baccharam, dated from 500,000 to 233,000 years ago. And here we have in the left-hand corner is a mine of red ochre. The earliest possible use of red ochre is 300,000 years old, and it is a site from Africa. There's also, up in the right-hand corner, is a 300,000-year-old wolf tooth pendant from Austria. Excuse me. And then in the bottom right is an early humans lived 300,000 years ago, but they had modern faces already. So 400,000 to 350,000 years ago in Germany, found an elephant bone with 7 and 14 parallel lines. May have been some sort of artifact or art. Homo erectus bones of at least 3 individuals with skulls that had intentionally smashed after death may represent some sort of burial rite. There is evidence of an emerging preference for the aesthetic among Homo erectus of the Lower Paleolithic Older Stone Age. Lower Paleolithic art, namely the so-called Venus of Tantan in the middle of the picture, and this is definitely before 300,000, and the Venus of Background, which is 250,000, is the center right corner, whatever, or it's the right side. Anyways, it's that smaller thing. But so in particular, there's a high variety in symmetry exhibited in the gathered stones, and some with seeming faces on the stones, and as well as some stone tools with possible faces, in addition to the stone tools that often seem manufactured with a much higher care than would be strictly needed just for use. Progressed superstition. 300,000 years ago in Spain is evidence of intentional or seemingly intentional storing of bodies or bones from at least 32 people in a cave chamber pit. It may have symbolized a possible pseudo womb. Put people back where they came from, in a sense. This behavior possibly suggests a belief that dead humans or human hominids are not the same as, in a sense, other animals. A stone axe made of red quartzite was found, exposed as possibly some sort of ritual offering or a funeral, in a sense. If it is so, it would be, in a sense, the oldest surviving known evidence of sacred funerary practices. $200,000-year-old shell beads from Libya. I believe they also could have a not just utilitarian, but or even artistic, but possibly even a religious connotation. So Neanderthals built series of large underground structures 175,000 years ago in France. Did Neanderthals teach us, or at least primal religion, or at least burial and what may be thought of as an afterlife? Well, 143,000 to 120,000 years ago in Tabern or Bun Cave in Israel, found evidence of a Neanderthal type burial of an arcane, could be Neanderthal human female. And there is evidence the burial and cave also in shoal of 130 to 100,000, which may be possibly even Neanderthal human hybrids. Though early modern humans started engaging in burials around 100,000 years ago, seen in Israel cave, one should wonder, did Neanderthals teach humans religion, or at least this ritual burial? And like I said, could it have happened 120 to 100,000 years ago? This thinking that Neanderthals could have offered some primal religion could come from, is supported in how, in a sense, Neanderthals had these religious type behaviors way before humans. 250,000 years ago, Neanderthals used red ochre, and possibly 230,000 years ago seems to show evidence of Neanderthal burial with even grave goods, possibly demonstrating a belief in an afterlife. 130,000 years ago, as I said before, is the earliest undisputed evidence for intentional burial, and it is Neanderthals. North Israel, like we said, the Tabam Cave, and it contains Neanderthal type burial of a female. And it could be a hybrid or human, Neanderthal or Neanderthal. And the material remains from the upper strata in the cave are of a type of culture that was stone tool culture for 200,000 to 45,000 years ago. Small flint tools made of thin flakes are predominant here. Many produced by a certain kind of a technique, a method of carefully trimming the flint core before desired shape can flake off. Tools typical of this culture are elongated points, flakes of various shapes used as scrapers, end scrapers, and may have tool used for cutting and sawing. Primal Religion, 100,000 years ago. The burial in Israel, modern human remains stained with red ochre. A variety of grave goods were found at the burial site. 71 pieces of red ochre and red ochre stained stone tools were found near the bones, suggesting ritual use. The mandible of a wild boar was found placed in the arms of one of the skeletons. Early animism, 100,000 to 74,000 years ago, Border Cave, South Africa. 75,000 to 70,000 years ago, we have evidence in South Africa of the first worship of what looks like a stone snake. And that's it.